Have you ever felt like you're living in an upside-down world where the manipulator gets praised while the one who's been hurt is the one questioned? Maybe you tried to speak up, dared to expose the lies, but what you received in return was a cold stare, an eerie silence, or worse, an accusation that you're just too sensitive. If that's ever made you feel alone, then this video is for you. Not to vilify anyone, but to shine a light on a truth too many are silently enduring emotional manipulation in the shadows. And today, we're not just going to talk about the pain, we're going to walk through it together with clarity, wisdom, and power. So if you've ever felt like you were stuck in a play you didn't write, stay until the end of this video. Hit subscribe, turn on the notifications, and join me on a healing journey where silence is no longer weakness, but your greatest strength. Part 1. The Quiet Awakening of a Soul. You didn't see it coming. No one ever does. They entered your life like sunlight, warm, radiant, gentle. Perhaps they were the ideal partner, a soulmate, or even a family member who made you believe, this is someone who would never hurt me. They listened to you, praised you, made you feel special, so much so that you began to second-guess that initial sense of caution you once had. But that wasn't a coincidence. That was the first stage of manipulation disguised as care. And then, things started to shift. Just little things. A subtle insult buried in laughter. A glance that made you question what you'd done wrong. A passing remark that kept you awake at night. And the most painful part, you were the one trying to rationalize it all. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. Maybe they're just tired today. Maybe I'm the one overcomplicating things. And so you slowly wandered into a fog, a blind spot where the line between love and control began to blur. You started to doubt yourself, question your emotions, and worked harder to please them, hoping that if you were just a little better, a little calmer, a little less sensitive, they'd go back to being who they were at the beginning. But they don't go back, because that version of them never truly existed. Silent manipulation. When the victim becomes the one who feels guilty. One of the most dangerous signs in a relationship with a narcissist is that you don't realize you're being hurt because they make you believe it's your fault. Their manipulation is so subtle, so calculated, you don't have the language to name it. There's no shouting, no obvious violence, just the quiet twisting of reality that makes you feel guilty for setting boundaries. When you cry, they say you're too emotional. When you question them, they call you paranoid. When you're sad, they accuse you of making everything dramatic. Eventually, you find yourself apologizing for things you didn't even do. You try to fix yourself to manage your emotions, to become more reasonable, hoping that if you're gentle enough, composed enough, kind enough, they'll stop hurting you. But here's the truth. You can't heal someone who doesn't think they're broken. And the more you try, the more they realize they can control you using your own kindness against you. Awakening doesn't come all at once. It comes in quiet, painful pieces. You don't wake up from this kind of manipulation through one big explosion. Not from a single cruel insult. Not from being harshly abandoned. It happens slowly, night after night, as you lie in silence, your heart aching even as they're sleeping beside you. It's when you try to voice your pain, but are met with cold detachment. It's when you realize they're not truly listening, they're just waiting for you to stop talking. And in that moment, though, you haven't left yet, though you still love them, a part of you begins to pull away. Silent. Observing. Awakening. Part 2. The Quiet Awakening that cannot be reversed. When you begin to see the truth clearly, you don't scream. You don't break things. You don't cause a scene. You just grow quiet. Not because you've stopped loving them, but because you've started loving yourself more. You no longer need to win every argument. You let them be right because you've realized you no longer want to be in a relationship where you must win just to be respected. You begin to fall silent, not out of surrender, but because you no longer feel the need to prove anything to them. You stop sending long texts to explain yourself. You stop bending over backwards to maintain a good enough image. You stop compromising just to preserve a fragile peace, and that's when they start to worry. Because when you stop reacting, they lose control. Emotional manipulators aren't afraid of your anger. They're used to it. They know how to twist it, flip it back on you, and turn it into a weapon. They know how to use your outbursts as proof that you're the unstable one. But when you go silent, when you no longer need them to understand, when you stop trying to be seen to be validated, they panic because you're no longer playing the game. You're not making the next move. And no one can win a game when the other person refuses to play. They don't panic because they've lost you. They panic because they've lost control of your mind. They've lost your reactions, their primary fuel source. You don't walk away because you're stronger than them, but because you finally know your worth. Your retreat isn't born from rage, it's born from clarity. You're not running away. You're walking away deliberately, consciously. You start rebuilding yourself quietly without fanfare, without needing to prove that you've healed. Because true healing doesn't need to be declared. It radiates in your eyes, in your calmness, in every breath that no longer carries the weight of fear. You start sleeping better. You start seeing more clearly the things that once felt confusing. And most of all, you begin forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for staying too long, for trying too hard, for believing that true love had to come with pain. Silence is no longer a sign of weakness. It becomes the loudest voice of awakening. The world may never fully understand your story. They may see your withdrawal and assume you gave up. They may only hear the manipulator's version and believe you were the problem. But you don't need to correct that. You don't need to be believed, defended, or validated anymore. Because now you know, this truth doesn't need a microphone. It only needs time. And you, the one who chose to walk out of the darkness, are the clearest proof that truth was always on your side. Part 3. Silent Victory and the Strategy of Light. There comes a moment when you realize it's not the truth that people believe first, it's appearances. And the most skilled manipulators know exactly how to polish their image, crafting a flawless persona, kind, generous, trustworthy, even innocent. They know how to win admiration. And you, the only one who knows the truth, are branded as the negative one, the complicated one, maybe even the unlovable one. You don't just endure the wounds. You're also misunderstood, isolated, and cast out as the one with the problem. But instead of screaming to be heard, you choose a different strategy, intentional withdrawal. A retreat that is quiet, non-retaliatory, drama-free. Just a pause, grounded, steady, and filled with inner strength. And when you stop reacting, they begin to reveal themselves. Do you know what truly throws manipulators off balance? It's when you stop responding the way you used to. No angry texts, no desperate explanations, no chasing after reconciliation, no need for agreement, no need to be understood. You let silence speak for you. And when you withdraw your presence, they try to pull you back, not out of love, but out of a need to reclaim control over the script. They'll try everything. Play the victim guilt trip, you bring up old memories or suddenly become understanding. But this time, you see the curtain. You're no longer sitting in the audience watching their show. And without an audience, the performance falls apart. Freedom doesn't come when they fall apart. It comes when you no longer need them to. True freedom isn't when they finally admit they were wrong, or offer a heartfelt apology, or fall to their knees in regret. True freedom is when you no longer need any of that to move forward. You understand now waiting for accountability from them is like waiting for a door that was never built to open. You stop hoping for apologies that won't come. Stop expecting change they were never capable of. You choose to live. Not to prove anything to them, but for yourself. To live whole, to live clear, to live free from repeating the same cycles. And the life you create, peaceful, powerful, radiant, becomes the most undeniable proof of the truth even if you never speak a word. The final strategy. No revenge, no bitterness, just your absence. They may continue to play the good person. They may rewrite the story of your relationship, but you are no longer a character in their script. You've gone farther, deeper, and most importantly, higher. When one person stops playing the game ends. You don't need to win because you've already left the battlefield. You don't need defenders because you've defended yourself. You don't need applause because you've chosen peace as your reward. You don't need them to understand. You only need one thing, that it no longer hurts. Part 4. Rebuilding yourself. A journey without an audience, but full of light. In the end, you realize the person who needed saving the most was never them. It was you. Because for all those years, you weren't truly living as yourself. You lived as a version shaped, bent, and compressed to fit someone else's mold. You sacrificed truth for artificial peace. You traded your self-respect for fleeting moments of conditional love. But now, in the stillness, you begin to see every fracture clearly. You no longer deny them. You touch the pain not to punish yourself, but to understand. You no longer turn your face from the past. You look at it with compassion for the version of you who endured. And in that moment, healing begins. Healing doesn't come with a stage or applause. Just you and the truth. No one saw you curled up in the dark wondering if you were lovable at all. No one witnessed the times you smiled on the outside while you were breaking on the inside. No one knows how many times you wanted to give up, but didn't, because something deep inside still believed you were worthy of something better. And the most beautiful part, you don't need anyone to witness it for it to be real, because light doesn't need an audience to exist. It just needs to be lit. You don't need to be fully healed to begin again. You just need to begin. Many people believe they have to wait until they're fully strong, completely free of pain, entirely confident, before they can start a new life. But the truth is, no one ever reaches that perfect moment. You begin again while your hands are still shaking, while your heart is still aching, while memories still haunt you. You begin even when you're not ready, and that is the very definition of courage. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to move forward even in the presence of it. You don't need revenge. You don't need to expose them. You just need to walk into the light. Manipulators live by scripts. They need you to keep playing your role. When you refuse to act anymore, they lose direction, and you don't need to scream in their face. I see who you really are. You just need to walk away. No blessings. No goodbyes. No validation from someone who used silence as a weapon against you for so long. Because a quiet but resolute exit is the most powerful message you'll ever send. And now, you're no longer a victim. You are a survivor, a rebuilder, a living witness to the truth. You may not be perfect. You may still have days when you fall apart, but you are not the same. You've overcome a manipulation that many can't even name. You've risen from a script where you were nothing more than a puppet. You've learned to trust your own voice, even when no one else believed it. And you're becoming yourself no longer through anyone else's lens, no longer contorted to please, no longer hiding, just to be accepted. Part 5. When you begin. Living a life. No longer dependent on others' perception. It's not easy to live knowing that many still believe a distorted version of your story. They may see you as the one who walked away, the cold one, the person who caused problems and disappeared. You know they've never heard the real story, or worse, they heard it and simply didn't care. But one day, you stop trying. You stop explaining. You stop defending yourself. And the whispers no longer sting because you realize if someone truly cared, they would have listened from the beginning. And if someone chooses to believe lies without question, maybe they were never meant to walk this next chapter with you. You don't seek justice from the mouth of the manipulator. You find balance within yourself. True justice doesn't come from watching them be exposed. It comes from no longer being controlled by them. Justice isn't them paying a price. It's you no longer paying with your peace. You realize inner peace is the most beautiful form of justice, and you choose it daily, not as a reaction, but as a promise. A quiet vow to yourself that you will never return to the cycle, the one where you lost yourself, just to hold on to someone who was never worthy of the cost. A new life doesn't begin when you meet someone new. It begins when you meet yourself again. You once chased love like someone starving. You believed that if someone saw your worth, then you'd finally be worthy. But now you know, value doesn't come from external validation. It grows from the quiet awakening within. You begin to learn how to care for yourself again, not with luxurious vacations or perfect Instagram moments, but with the smallest things: getting enough sleep, eating full meals, saying no when needed, crying when it hurts, and not being ashamed of your imperfections. You learn to ask yourself, how am I feeling today? And to truly listen, without judgment, without masks, without pretending. And one day you're no longer living to prove anything. You're simply living as yourself. No one's going to pat you on the back and say, "Well done, you finally got out." There are no spotlights when you wash your face after a midnight panic attack. But in that silence, something sacred is growing. It's in the moment you look at your reflection and smile, not because everything's perfect, but because you know you're being real. No longer afraid of being abandoned. No longer running from loneliness. No longer clinging to someone incapable of loving you in a healthy way. You're not perfect, but you're free. Part 6. When you open your heart. Again. As someone who has awakened. After the pain, a quiet part of you breaks the part that once believed love was supposed to be a safe place. You once loved with everything you had, with a sincere heart, with endless patience, with the hope that if you were good enough, they would never want to hurt you. But that love became the place where you were broken the most. And so you built walls. You became cautious. A compliment made you suspicious. Kindness felt dangerous. You wondered, if I open up again, will I pay for it all over again? But the difference now is you don't open your heart because you need to. You open it because you choose to. Back then, you loved to feel whole. Now you love because you already are. Back then, you needed someone to validate your worth. Now you know your worth, even if no one stands beside you. Back then, you gave in order to be loved. Now you give because love is your nature, not a currency for acceptance. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. You know your boundaries. You spot red flags early. You no longer justify disrespect with cute excuses. You can love deeply and still hold on to yourself. Love doesn't mean losing yourself in another. Love doesn't mean enduring endlessly. Love doesn't mean shrinking, forgiving everything, sacrificing always. True love never asks you to abandon yourself just to save the relationship. Now you love from a grounded place, where you're no longer trying to be the ideal partner, but simply being who you are. And if someone can't accept that, you no longer stay to prove that you're worthy. And if you're not ready to open your heart yet, that's perfectly okay. Sometimes healing isn't about loving someone new. It's about learning to sit with yourself and not feel empty. It's about tidying up the soul's room, sweeping out the shattered beliefs, wiping down the memories that still sting, and placing a small pot of hope on your inner windowsill. There's no rush. No two people heal on the same timeline. You're not behind. You're being honest with how you feel, and that's the bravest thing you can do right now. Because the one who is truly meant for you will never ask you to shrink just to fit into their life. You don't have to be softer, quieter, or more manageable to be loved. You don't have to become a more agreeable version of yourself to make someone stay. The right person won't demand you abandon your identity. They won't make you question your emotions. They won't use your kindness as a tool to manipulate you. And most importantly, you're no longer someone who can't recognize that. You are a soul that has awakened, and once awake, you can never pretend not to know the truth again. Part 7. When you no longer need to hold on to anyone, only to hold on to yourself. Life doesn't begin to change with one grand event. It starts in the smallest of details. You wake up in the morning without the heaviness that used to linger. You no longer check your phone with anxiety. You no longer live in a state of waiting for a compliment, a phone call, or some unexpected gesture to feel like you matter. You start doing things because you enjoy them, not because you want someone to notice. You buy yourself flowers because you want your space to feel bright, not because you're waiting for someone else to give them. You dress well because you love yourself, not because you're afraid of being compared to their ex. You smile genuinely because you feel light, not as a forced mask to keep the peace. And that is a quiet, radiant resurrection. You're no longer living in survival mode. You're beginning to truly live. Before, every day was an invisible war. You walked on edge. Every word you spoke was measured. Every action filtered through the lens of, don't let them misunderstand. You weren't living, you were merely surviving. Now you breathe deeper. Your eyes no longer look away. Your heart doesn't flinch when a message pops up. You walk taller, not to appear strong, but because the weight is finally off your shoulders. You've stopped trying to hold on to people because you no longer believe that losing someone means losing everything. Once you thought if they left, you'd fall apart. That you'd never love again, never find joy again. But the truth is, they did leave in one way or another, and you're still here. Not only surviving, but truly living. And day by day, you're thriving. You've realized, if someone only stays when you abandon yourself to keep them, that isn't love worth keeping. Now you choose differently. You no longer hold on. You let go of what no longer fits. You release what was never real. You walk away from what once shattered you to make room for yourself to be whole again. You're not someone who needs saving. You are someone who rose from the ashes. Time will speak the truth. You no longer feel the need to shout. The life you're rebuilding will answer every misunderstanding others had about you. And the light you now carry, the light of a soul brave enough to escape the dark, will illuminate not only your own path, but the paths of others still lost in the emotional labyrinth you once escaped. Because you are living proof of a powerful truth. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because you finally woke up. Part 8. When your peace becomes a light for others. Not everyone will see the battle you've fought. They only see the person you are now, calm, grounded, clear. They don't know you were once the one lying awake at night, crying over a curt message, shrinking yourself, just to keep the peace, losing your sense of direction from nothing more than a frown from someone you loved. But because you've walked through that darkness, your very presence now offers others a sense of safety without needing to say a word. You don't need to preach. Your silence is already showing others the way. Those who've been broken once they've healed don't need to scream. They change the energy of a room simply by walking in. They bring comfort just by listening. You don't have to recount every wound or prove how deeply you were hurt. The way you step back at the right moment, say no without lengthy explanation, or remain composed in the face of unreasonable criticism, these speak louder than any lesson. They show something far more powerful. You no longer live in fear. And then, those who were once like you will recognize you. They will find you sometimes without saying a word, simply because they feel something different in your presence. Maybe it's an old friend exhausted by a relationship that's draining their soul. Maybe it's a stranger who only needs one glance from you to know, here I won't be judged. You don't call yourself a guide. But your clarity, your boundaries, your refusal to bend, just to be liked, all create a space where others can breathe. You become a quiet witness of healing with no title, no microphone, no spotlight. You once felt alone on this path, but now you understand true light doesn't need a crowd to justify its existence. Maybe you still live alone. Maybe you're not ready to love again. Maybe you're still gathering the scattered pieces of your heart. But this time, you're not lost. You're not running anymore. You're not trying to forget as a way to escape pain. You've stayed with yourself, and slowly you've come to realize this is the safest place you've ever known. Because when you step out of manipulation, out of victimhood, out of the dark, you don't just save yourself, you light the path for others who don't yet know they're lost. You don't need slogans. You don't need to lecture. You just need to live with healthy boundaries, restored self-worth, and a heart that's no longer shut down but now knows who to open up to. You no longer need a beautiful ending. You just need a life that is real. Part 9. When you no longer need their apology, because you've given yourself the closure you deserve. Maybe you once hoped that one day they'd call, that they'd say sorry, that they'd whisper, "I was wrong." Maybe you waited for a message just to hear them finally admit, "I hurt you." Maybe you even imagined the moment they'd break down, realizing they had lost the most precious thing they ever had. But then, time passed. No message came, no apology, no grand confession of regret. And you came to understand some things will never arrive, not because you weren't worthy of them, but because they were never capable of giving them. True healing begins when you stop waiting on anyone but yourself. You no longer live in the land of what ifs. What if they changed? What if they understood? What if they came back? You stop writing scripts and feeling disappointed when the actors don't play the parts. You stop using the past to bargain with the present. Instead, you choose truth. They didn't apologize. They might never apologize. And even though that truth once tore through your chest, you still rose. You decided, "I don't need their apology to heal. I don't need them to fall apart so I can rise. I don't need validation from someone who never valued the truth." Because an apology without remorse is just a new manipulation. You've learned this. Some apologies don't come from repentance, but from a need to be forgiven without having to change. Some tears aren't from guilt. They're from the fear of losing control. You're no longer easily swayed by late-stage guilt. You know how to tell the difference between true remorse and a tactic to pull you back into the same toxic cycle. And in that clarity, you are free. Freedom is when you no longer need them to fall for you to hold your head high. You don't need their downfall. You don't need their mask ripped off in public. You don't need the one who broke you to be broken in return. Because when you've truly healed, you no longer feel satisfaction in anyone else's pain. You just want to live, and live honestly. You want to walk the street without looking over your shoulder. You want to hear an old song and not break down. You want to love again if love comes without fear of repeating the same wounds. And the most complete moment of all is when you can say, "I forgive," not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Forgiveness not to restore the relationship, not to let them back in, but as a sacred act of self-liberation, a reclaiming of your emotional power, a declaration that you will no longer carry what was never yours to bear. You don't need to win. You don't need a verdict. You just need to know you lived with truth. You loved with truth. And you walked away not as a victim, but as someone who chose to stop before losing themselves. Part 10. When healing is no longer a story of pain, but a story of light. You look back on the journey you've walked not with eyes of bitterness, but with a tender heart. Not tenderness for the one who hurt you, but tenderness for yourself. For the girl who didn't dare to leave because she feared being alone. For the boy who stayed silent to keep the peace. For the version of you who forgot who they were just to remain in a one-sided love. You embrace them, the old, broken, naive, loyal to a false self. You no longer feel shame for those mistakes. You know without them there would be no you today. You didn't just escape. You've returned. Returned to the peace in your chest. Returned to the eyes that meet the world without flinching. Returned to the laughter that doesn't have to be forced. You no longer live inside a performance. You're no longer striving to be loved. You no longer bow your head in fear of losing someone. And the miracle is, you didn't become harder. You became whole. You don't need a happy ending with the past because you've written a new ending for yourself. An ending without closure. A goodbye without conflict. A departure that needed no explanation. All you need to know is this. You are no longer there, not geographically, but spiritually. You've shifted frequencies out of manipulation, out of the looped script. And in that silence, you found something you once lost, the right to live in truth. And if someone asks, "How did you survive?" you won't give a dramatic monologue. You won't paint a battle scene. You'll just smile and say I chose to walk away when no one believed me. I forgave myself for staying too long. I stopped waiting for them to fix it and started healing on my own. I no longer needed to be believed, only to be free. And if today you've read this far, please believe this. You are not alone. You were not wrong for loving deeply. You were not weak for staying too long. You are not broken for crying in silence. You are living proof that the truth, even when buried, distorted, or dismissed, always finds its moment to rise. And when you no longer need to be seen, believed, or defended, that's when the light inside you begins to shine outward. Not to take revenge, but to light the way for those still stuck, still trembling, still believing they'll never make it out. So if this path feels like your own, leave a quiet note behind. I made it home. No name, no explanation. Just a quiet confirmation. You're no longer in the dark. And if you want, I'm here to walk the next part with you. Because once light is lit, it never goes out again. You've made it to the very end of this video, and that's no coincidence. Maybe you haven't been in the exact kind of relationship we just explored. But if your heart is stirring, if a silence within you just found its name, if you've ever felt lost, exhausted, or misunderstood, then know this: you are not alone. You're living in a world where appearances often overshadow truth. A world where manipulators are trusted and those who've been hurt are labeled too sensitive. But you, the one who stayed, the one who loved, the one who forgave more than once, you are not weak. You are living proof of the strength it takes to keep choosing kindness even in the dark. If you're still in the middle of the journey, unable to leave, unable to speak, unable to forgive yourself, that's okay too. This path doesn't demand perfection, only honesty. Just pause for a moment and say, I'm tired. I need to be understood. I deserve something healthier. And if today you've felt comforted, seen, or simply accompanied, I invite you to hit subscribe. Not to become a number, but so you won't lose the light as you walk through the next dark valley on your journey. Because here we don't teach you to be strong. We walk with you as you learn to be honest with your emotions. Turn on the notification bell, because in the upcoming videos we'll explore grounded strategies, psychological insights, and deep reflections on the intersection of emotion, boundaries, and self-worth. And if there's something you want to share, a sentence, a thought, or even just a silent punctuation mark, leave it in the comments. Because maybe, just maybe, your words will reach someone who needs them most. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for not abandoning yourself. And remember, awakening doesn't come from the storm. It comes from the quiet moment you decide not to walk the same path ever again. And if today is that moment for you, congratulations. You've just begun a brand new life,